I'm really excited to introduce Mirna, White Mountain's first Family and Alumni Weekend keynote speaker. In her wonderful book, A Beautiful Work in Progress, Mirna shares, among other experiences, stories about the adventure and self-discovery of ultramarathon running. Ultras are races whose distances are longer than the 26.2 miles of a standard marathon. I first learned about the Mirnavator, the nickname by which Mirna's 116,000 followers on Instagram know her, in a trail running magazine a few years ago. I'm pretty sure she can offer us some wisdom that will help us in 2020. Many people have commented that the layered crises we're facing are a marathon, not a sprint. From my own experience, what we're facing is more like a trail ultramarathon. While pacing is required in a marathon, the course is clear, there's predictable refreshment along the way, and you know roughly when you'll be done. When I did my first trail ultra, I carried food, water, and extra clothing with me because I had a sketchy hand-drawn map of the course, and I didn't know if there would be regular aid along the trail. And given that it was farther than I'd ever run before and up and over mountains, I couldn't be sure how long it would take. I did my best to slow down, to be in the moment, and to not focus on how many miles were in front of me. The metaphor to this year fails, of course, because it was a challenge I chose. None of us would have chosen to be faced with these crises. And yet the opportunity presents itself for a school community to become a better version of itself through dealing with adversity. Back to the 2020 as ultramarathon metaphor, traditional road races are reasonably friendly events, but trail running has a remarkable culture of encouragement, selflessness, and acceptance that is often what participants most appreciate about the activity. With persistence and compassion, we might enhance those characteristics at White Mountain as we live through 2020. Mirna, as someone who finds joy and movement outdoors, as a boarding school graduate and former teacher, as a diversity practitioner, as a lover of the outdoors who lives Aunt Dot's notion that students should see things greater than themselves in nature, can help point us the right way on our path. We're very grateful for her presence with us tonight. Mirna?
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. I think are we showing the film now?
We are.
Yeah, okay, cool.
One of my very first experiences being out in nature as a 9-year-old was a nighttime stream hike. The silence of the forest was deafening. It was a completely new sensory experience for all of us. All of these little kids from the 5 boroughs of New York City, and a lot of us had never had experiences in the outdoors like this. But here we are holding hands for safety, for comfort, in the forest, where we could only hear the water rushing through, and we could hear each other breathing and feel our hearts beating really fast. And we just stood there and listened. Let it be silent. That was it. Like, I was sold. My name is Mirna Valerio, and I am an ultra marathoner, a writer, a former teacher, and I'm a sponsored athlete. Typically, ultra marathons start at 50K, which is 31 miles, and they move up from there. I love long distance running. It gives me a lot of time outdoors. I'm a slow runner, and I just will delight in spending hours and hours and hours outside. The colors of nature, the trees, the sounds of nature, the ability to feel my most human is what I enjoy most. I can hear my own footfalls. I am with myself, and I feel great, and I feel small at the same time. I feel at one with nature because I am part of nature and nature is part of me. All of those things come up when I'm out running or hiking, surrounded by green or gold or red or all of the above. It just really fulfills something very deep in me. I want people to know that adventure is for everybody, and adventure means different things to different people. Like, the trail is for everybody, the outdoors. is for everybody. And I think not enough people know that, and not enough people feel sort of invited into outdoor spaces, but really the outdoors is for everyone. When I have the opportunity, like within my communities, I have a community called Fat Girl Running. I get to introduce people to those kinds of experiences with the same feeling of safety, even though they might be trepidatious about something that they've never done before. I want as many people as possible to have an experience in the outdoors that is life-changing and soul-filling. I love testing the limits of my mind and my body. And now that's what I do professionally. I demonstrate and I'm role model to people that, no matter what your body size or type is, you can always push yourself physically and mentally and always like reach new heights.
See, like, make sure I'm unmuted. Okay. Thank you, John and Scott, for inviting me here to talk with the White Mountain School community this evening. As you can see, the outdoors is my home, my work, my refuge, my playground, my joy. And there are a couple of short films about me floating around the interwebs, and I love all of them, but I think this one really illustrates who I am as an outdoor person and how I think that time spent in the outdoors is beneficial to all of humanity. So before I begin, I would love to know, where was the last place you experienced something phenomenal outside? If you would do me the favor of putting that in the chat, and I'll read some of the comments that come up. So what was the last place you experienced something phenomenal outside? Let's see what you got for me. The last place you experienced something really cool: Utah, climbing Cannon Cliff. Very cool. Banff, it's so cool. I saw a pair of deer on our campus trails out with students earlier this week. Hiking in Switzerland, drinking spring water from an actual spring. Yes. San Miguel, Mexico. Buddha Boulder this morning in the woods, encountering a coyote in Massachusetts behind my parents' house. Zion backcountry. Zion, one of my favorite places ever. Warm fog over the water. I love it. I love it. Oh, so many experiences are just bursting out of you. Rust Pond, on a school trail, walking with friends. Oh, wow. So much good stuff here. Thank you so much for entertaining that with me. Seeing a hawk in front of me. Whoa, was that scary? Mountain biking. Today with my wife and dog in a deep woods hike in New York. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing those things with me, and feel free to continue sharing those things in the chat as I go. So when I am outside, mostly in above -6 degrees Fahrenheit, whatever that is in Celsius, I feel my most human. I am connected to the earth, to my most profound sense of myself, and by default, I am connected to other human beings. This past summer, I was out hiking a short, flattish portion of the Long Trail in Vermont, and we know that nothing in Vermont or on the Long Trail is flat, but here we were. I was with my friend, Cara Richardson Whiteley, who is the author of Gorge, which is her memoir that is being made into a movie pretty soon. And we were hiking in a rainstorm that turned into a pretty loud thunderstorm. John, I know that you've read my book, and I have a whole entire chapter of my book on thunderstorms and my fear of them. But thunderstorms really do scare me. And what they do is that they knock all of the intellectual ability out of me and force me to return to my most childlike, scared, and most amygdala-fueled self. Normally, when I'm with someone and it's storming, I am comforted by their presence. But for some reason or another, this particular storm filled me with a nervous, anxious fear and existential dread. And this was fear and anxiety that I'd been carrying around, much like many of us during those first couple of months of the various COVID shutdown, stay at home, safer at home, shelter in place, and lockdown mandates. In fact, just in case you weren't aware or you've been living under a rock, here's what we've been experiencing now and collectively. heightened stress and anxiety across the board, general physical fatigue, screen time fatigue. I mean, there are even studies coming out about Zoom fatigue specifically. Lack of personal time and or too much solitude from isolation and physical distancing, loss of physical connection within communities and among families that really can't be replaced by online relationships and Zoom weddings and Zoom funerals, although we do try, we try really hard. Huge financial losses and general economic anxiety. And up until today, our lives have really been reduced to basic survival level. So any safety we might have had or felt pre-COVID with respect to our physiological needs, shelter, nourishment, protection from the weather, from ailments, clean air, water, even clothing, and until recently, toilet paper, has been compromised. Our safety has been compromised. And all of this puts everybody in a state of constant fear, anxiety, and in defense mode. So I was carrying all of that in this thunderstorm. You know, what scares me the most about thunderstorms is that I always feel alone and that I'm the only person viscerally feeling the rumbles of thunder, and that I'm the only one who feels out of whack when faced with the loud sonic booms and bright lightning across the sky. And even though I was with my friend Cara, and even though she had checked in on me multiple times, like a good friend does, I couldn't shake this feeling that I was alone in my misery and fear. The sky had turned rather dark and gloomy in a matter of minutes, and then sheets of rain enveloped us. Water seeped through our high-tech, very high-tech waterproof rain jackets, and nothing could comfort me and warm me. I was cold, I was wet, worried about slipping on the granite cobbles. I bet you know how that feels in New Hampshire, that littered our path, and slightly worried about maybe getting struck by lightning, because it's always a possibility, right? But we never really know when or where it will strike. Is this a euphemism for like everything now? We hadn't seen other folks out on the trail at all, not even in the 4 hours we had been out. I kept hiking and trying to pretend a thunderstorm wasn't raging around me, another euphemism, right? I tried to think of nice things like a warm car, a meal, but not in an actual restaurant because that wasn't a thing yet, or seeing other humans on the trail. Eventually, we reached an intersection of the long trail and another trail where there was an abundance of trail signs. You know, those carved wooden ones that just kind of pop up out of nowhere, that are very whimsical and artful. So let me tell you about how much I love trail signs. I really, really adore trail signs. And I know it's a little weird and a little odd, but here's what they do. They show you directions and how far to the nearest trailhead. They orient you if you're lost, or sometimes they even make you more lost. They indicate that a shelter or a vista is nearby. Most of all, they let you know that another human or many humans have traversed the same path and have wondered where to go next. They remind you that you're not alone and that you have footsteps of others to follow or diverge from, and that others after you will take similar cues and get to where they need to go. In essence, trail signs remind you that there's an entire community of folks who have done the same thing, who may have had the same goals and dreams as you might. They remind you of those who may have similar blisters on their feet and stinky socks and hiking boots that are probably past their prime. They remind you that others have come to experience the same feeling you get when you walk through a very dense patch of luminescent green and dewy ferns, and you don't quite have the words to capture their particular brilliance. They remind you that the sunlight filtered through the canopy that you felt on your face at the top of that ridge was experienced by other human beings on the same trail, on the same mountain. And they remind you that others, maybe on the same day, a different day, year, or century, have had to contend with nature's whimsy and ever-changing moods, like a very long thunderstorm popping up when it wasn't even supposed to rain. Or they remind you that others have had to summon courage in the face of a fierce thunderstorm or something else that instills fear and trepidation, and continue to move on with their journey despite being filled with fear. Yeah, trail signs do all of that for me. While the thunderstorm is still raging, I find comfort in knowing that I am part of something larger and more complex, and that I am not alone. I'm not alone. We are not alone. One of the gifts of the outdoors, whatever your idea of the outdoors is that it offers us a constant stream of experiences that connect us to the land and other human beings. awe is one of those experiences. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, awe is an emotion variously combining dread, veneration, and wonder that is inspired by authority or by the sacred or sublime. The other cool thing is that contemporary psychologists agree that experiences with awe and wonder fire up areas in the brain that inspire compassion, social connection, generosity, and community. I'll say more about this later. Honestly, there's no better time to call upon the powers of awe, wonderment, and amazement to help heal our world from the various fissures that have historically and to this day are currently serving to tear apart our society. Have you ever stood on a ridge and marveled at the mountaintops all around you? Have you ever watched the edge of a microburst approach, not knowing what on earth it could be, but then witnessing the extensive tornado-like damage it leaves in its wake? Truly frightening, truly awe-inducing. Or maybe you've experienced this, running around a volcanic crater in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean while surrounded by clouds that occasionally break, giving you glimpses of the most beautiful bluebird sky you've ever seen. Maybe you've witnessed an extraordinary kindness and moment of compassion and wondered how or why that person was inspired to extend themselves in that particular way to another human being. I've had the opportunity to do all of the above and more, and each experience left my brain tingling and my mouth speechless, which is nearly impossible, because I didn't quite have the means to explain what I had just seen, heard, or felt. These are all experiences of awe, of wonder, things we can't necessarily explain or verbalize within our own mental and experiential frameworks. Many times we don't even have the vocabulary to describe something because it's so far out of the range of our lived experiences that we have trouble putting those moments to words. Did anyone watch the film Free Solo that came out, I think last year or 2 years ago, maybe last year? What the inimitable Alex Honnold did, scaling the face of the 3,000-foot tall El Capitan in Yosemite National Park without harnesses, ropes, or anything but his chalk bag, his hands, feet, and extraordinary strength and flexibility. What he did was beyond my comprehension. Sure, he trained methodically, he planned every step, every hold, every movement, and every moment. He was ready. Yet the fact that he was able to complete this incredible feat was still unbelievable for many. That a human can scale a cliff of that magnitude is really, really hard to wrap our heads around or understand. And maybe, just maybe, we don't need to reach a complete understanding of this. Maybe we can just marvel at this extraordinary thing. Or maybe we can just trying to process it will force us to create new ways of thinking, new ways of connecting disparate and different ideas, experiences, and people. I believe that if we return to a state of wonder, if we can grapple with grandiose ideas and images like this often, if we make a concerted effort to experience awe on a daily basis, maybe not necessarily on the scale of Alex Honnold or the incredible Simone Biles, for example, we can work on formulating a society that is built on connection, community, compassion, generosity, courage, and a willingness to be all in together. Sounds like a tall order and maybe one that doesn't quite make a whole lot of sense yet, but hear me out on this. We already know that time in the outdoors comes with extraordinary benefits, a reduction in stress-related cortisol and inflammation, lowered blood pressure and lowered heart rate, better sleep, more synced circadian rhythms, more self-reliance, better problem solving, better cognition in general, and an improved ability to think clearly, a more elevated mood, a general sense of well-being, and no surprise here, experiences of awe help our general well-being. Everyone deserves opportunities to have all of this and to have access to those things that make us feel better and do better as human beings. So this begs the following questions. How do we regain momentum in our world and the communities that are suffering from so much these days? How do we do the very best we can to ensure that folks all over reap the benefits of, well, everything? How do we ensure that our resources, material, financial, power, recreational opportunities, and otherwise, are equitably sourced and distributed so that everyone can access compassion and connectedness? I think that there's an answer in the outdoors and experiencing something that leaves us so stunned we have no choice but to look to other humans to share in that moment. I think that those of us who have the privilege and of living, recreating, teaching, and learning in the outdoors have a unique opportunity to bring community and connection to our world. What if we all had the opportunity to share an incredible moment filled with surprise and the sublime with folks that we don't know, or with people we've already decided for some reason or another aren't part of our community? This is one of the problems we face in our increasingly disconnected world. We're so far apart from each other that it's tough to have empathy, care, and to have concern about others that aren't in our direct spheres of existence. I'm reminded of a few years ago, I was a teacher for 18 years, right? And so I used to chaperone many a backpacking trip with sophomores. The entire team of 10th grade teachers would get together and formulate hiking groups and we really tried to place kids who didn't know each other together. So there was always a rhyme and reason why we chose these particular groups. And so that the students would experience the challenges and beauty of a life lived outside together. So after the initial, oh my God, I don't even have to do this. And why are they making us do this? And I hate bugs and I don't poop except for in a bathroom. They would quickly get to the business of making sure everyone was well fed, warm, well equipped, and well rested, because if even one person wasn't, it affected the outcome, happiness, and safety of the entire group. So when those things are in order, were in order, sometimes after many a false start, it was easier for everyone to be receptive and accepting of others in the group, no matter what their pace was, if they were new to hiking or backpacking, or new to having to use a bathroom in the facilities, or if they couldn't figure out how to tie the paracord in the right kind of knot so that the tarp cover would be sturdy. I, mind you, was in a tent, so I didn't have to worry about that. When those things were taken care of, it was easy to be together and enjoy a sunset over the Blue Ridge Mountains, or to suddenly come across a 100-foot tall waterfall seemingly out of nowhere and be stunned. And once that happened, all bets were off. The students would be singing chapel songs. We were a Presbyterian heritage school, so there were so many chapel songs that everyone knew by heart. They befriended each other. They hiked happily together. They were discovering new things about themselves, asking very probing questions of the adults, telling stories and jokes while they hiked. And they always returned to school with renewed energy and memories that they would harken back to over and over again as they made their way to senior year. Shared experience, shared curiosity, shared struggle, shared success, shared beauty. This is what foments close relationships, care for one another, and generosity in the face of challenging times. There's a real and growing body of scientific and psychological research on these kinds of experiences that connect us deeply. In an article entitled The Emerging Science of Awe and Its Benefits, two psychologists named Dr. Keltner and Jonathan Haidt describe awe in this way. Awe is the sensation of being in the presence of something vast that simultaneously transcends one's understanding of the world, a state of being that straddles the boundary of pleasure and fear. I think this is a much more concise and descriptive definition than the Merriam-Webster attempt. And it seems so easy to say get outdoors, or be an outsider, or opt outside, or get out, stay out, or any of the popular outdoor hashtags we use on social media to indicate that we love the outdoors and believe that everyone should be outside. But many folks don't have experience or access to these potentially life-changing spaces. I personally believe that folks belong outside, whether it's on your porch, on a trail, on water, scaling a rock face, scrambling on top of a mountain, trekking across a glacier, swimming in your neighborhood pool, swinging on the swings in your local park, your backyard, in the city, the country, the desert, the jungle, wherever you might reside. I believe that we all deserve and need to experience awe. Everyone deserves and has a right to watch an incredible sunrise, or hear the birds start to chirp in the morning, signifying that the day is about to begin, even if they're crows, or feel the solid ground of the earth on their bare feet, or witness their first shooting star. In fact, one of the first experiences that I can remember of awe that I was at the same camp where I went on that nighttime stream hike in the video. That was so life-changing. The camp had timed it so that we would start Spirit Week the first day of the Perseid meteor shower. They woke us all up at 4 in the morning. We had no clue what was going on, while it was still dark. We were super confused and groggy, of course, after probably too many Oreos the night before. But we put some warm clothes on and headed out to this big field beyond the camp quad. And they had laid out blankets and sleeping bags on the grass that was really wet and dewy. There was only darkness and headlamps at first, but then when we all quieted down, many of us saw for the first time in our urban lives our first shooting star, then our second, then our third, and then hundreds. We oohed and awed and grinned, sleepy grins. And after about 30 minutes or so, we schlepped back to our cabins and slept, probably dreaming about shooting stars. And then awoke to find all the adults in clothing inside out and on backwards. I will always have this memory, and it will always be associated with shooting stars. I didn't have a language for it back then, but that moment, along with the stream hiking experience, the fact that I had learned to swim for the first time in a vast lake that I thought was bottomless, which still kind of terrifies me, but I'll do it. The extraordinary rainstorms that came out of nowhere, which we played in anyway, the way our bodies could do our final hike that felt like 20 miles back then, but I'm sure it was like 2 miles. All of this before our time at camp ended. And all of these experiences, the ones in which we didn't have the words or language to explain, connected us really deeply. We might have come in as city kids who, though young, had already learned to hold other people at a distance as a survival mechanism. But from the moment we were in that dark culvert, listening to the sounds of nature around us and watching our counselors' mouths spark with wintergreen lifesavers, to the moments that we watched our first shooting stars, huddled together on sleeping bags in a dewy field, those were the moments that I knew and felt deeply that I was connected to nature and to other people. It really sealed the deal. Florence Williams, in her book, The Nature Fix, writes, and I paraphrase, "The philosophy of awe verbalized in the 1700s by Edmund Burke asserts that it requires a vastness of extent and a degree of difficulty in our ability to make sense of it. It inspires feelings of humility and a more outward perspective. Psychologists today have also theorized that awe is a unique positive emotion that turns us away from narrow self-focus and towards the interests of our collective group." Paul Pliff out of UC Irvine remarks that an awe-inspiring experience can change someone's perspective for a long time, even permanently. And more recently, a 2017 study on awe and humility published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that by experiencing moments of awe and wonder, it forces us to feel humbled and drives home the point that we as individuals are small pieces of something way larger than we could ever imagine. This inspires people to feel more generous, more socially connected, more willing to engage in activities that promote the well-being of the community as a whole. And that, I think, is one of the biggest takeaways from this global crisis that we're in. What if, in fact, we did feel humbled and more socially connected? What if we were more generous and community-minded? What would that mean for the various crises that we're experiencing now? COVID, rampant unemployment, structural and systemic racism, all of the heightened anxiety around our elections and voting here in the States. So in effect, awe causes us to gain perspective, to be more connected to nature and to others, to be more concerned with our collective humanity, to be more generous. This community has a unique privilege. I know that I'm speaking to a varied audience filled with alums, current students and families, faculty and staff. You all have within you the incredible power to harness community, connectivity, and compassion in a world that is in desperate need of all of these things. The outdoors, and by default, wonder-filled experiences are naturally intertwined in your curriculum. The White Mountains have been and are literally your playground. Imagine if the world were set up where everyone had access to these incredible experiences. Imagine if we all had access to a moment that connected us so deeply we had no choice but to love. Let's share our awe. Let's share our vision of a world that is filled with courage, compassion, curiosity, and community. You've practiced and are practicing this here every day that you exist in this community. We all have the power and privilege to harness something good in the world right here and right this moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mirna. Wow. A lot to listen to and to take in. But now I'd like to invite all of our guests this evening to share some questions in the Q&A, and I'll read those aloud to Mirna to respond. I'm sure you can see in the comments, everyone's wow is right, and thank you, wonderful, thank you. What a great presentation. So let's go ahead and start entering in some of those questions in the Q&A box. And it looks like we have a couple coming in. So I'm going to share the first one with you, Mirna. The question is, your positive message is really amazing for us all. Since you've been doing this work for several years, can you share with us specific ways that we can carry this work of awe forward?
That's a great question. I think it's going to take me a couple of hours to arrive at an answer. I think, especially for a community like White Mountain School and other similar schools, perhaps, continuing to make sure that you bring in more and more people of, differing backgrounds. In my research, I know that you are a way more diverse school than other schools. Thank you for that. And, continuing to do that work along those lines, I think is really important, and exposing as many people as possible to these experiences, whether it's your students, whether it's the community around you, whether it's in the parent community, specifically if you have parents whose kids may have access to the experiences that you offer at school, but maybe the parents don't have that experience. Maybe the parents can go on a hike. Maybe, I'm sure that during your, when we are in different circumstances, when parents can come to campus and alums can come to campus, I'm sure you do hikes and stuff like that, but maybe increasing the range of people that you have touch points with and bringing those experiences to them as well would be really cool and really effective, I think.
Great. Mirna, in your presentation, you talked a little bit about imagine if everybody could experience the White Mountains, which we're also humbled by. One of our listeners has the question, can you talk about how you encourage first-time hikers to become first-time hikers?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about trail running because that's what I do. I'm hiking now because I have an injury, but I usually do trail running, and I bring women, many of whom who've never been on a trail before, but have a little curiosity about it, but don't know how to do it. And so what I do as a teacher, and I was a teacher for 18 years, so I have all these pedagogical methods that I utilize to scaffold experiences. We won't go out for our first hike won't be 20 miles or our first run won't be 20 miles. It might be a half a mile. And during that time, I make sure that it's a trail that's pretty easy, that's pretty accessible, that doesn't feel like it's way out in the backcountry where, people get scared and stuff. And I make it so that it is a very, very pleasurable experience. And also what's important is to really acknowledge people's experiences when they're out there. A lot of people are afraid of bugs. A lot of people will jump when something brushes by them. And just saying, oh, okay, I get it, you're scared. This was a leaf. that won't do anything to you, but I get it, you're scared. Do you want to move on? Do you want to take a minute? That sort of thing. And just being really invitational and really sort of soft. I know there are a lot of sort of outdoor programs that are like, we're going to go hard and we're going to do 20 miles. We're going to scale this mountain today. And we're all going to, sleep in the outside without tents. Those that approach works for some things, but for people who have no connection whatsoever, and you really want them to stay as hikers or to like remain hikers or to remain trail runners, I really feel like you got to make it very palatable to who they are and to where they are in their outdoor experience.
Another question that we have, and I'm going to combine it with one of the questions that's in the chat, is I've seen many of your videos, which are all set in the beautiful locations in nature. I live in New York City, and while we have some great parks, it's just not the same. Can you talk about your own experience growing up in the city? How did you find awe and joy there? And then the question in the chat is, how did you connect with running?
Sure. Yeah, so I grew up in Brooklyn, and we grew up in a time where we were not allowed to stay in our apartments like in the summertime. It was, we got up in the morning, we did our chores, and then it was out. You may not come back until dinner. And so so my cousins and I would just travel all over our area of Brooklyn and the neighboring neighborhoods, and we would visit parks. We'd go from park to park to park, and each park was different because they were all in different neighborhoods. And we'd swim at one park, we'd like go into sprinklers in another, then we'd go to public schools and go and get free lunch from like several schools a day. And then, you know, we would just kind of explore. That was my outdoors. And so, you know, when people say, oh, you know, the outdoors is like Mount Everest or, you know, the beautiful White Mountains, that is the outdoors, but there also is, there are all sorts of outdoors. And so that was my first experience of like just being comfortable being outside all day in all different kinds of weather. And that definitely transfers over to what I do now. When I'm home in Brooklyn, which I haven't been home in many months, you know, I will go to parks. I will run outside on the street or whatever it is. It's a different outdoors, but it is the outdoors nonetheless. And the running thing, really quickly, because I have a 45-minute presentation, but I won't do that now. I actually started running. I'm a product of boarding school myself. I played field hockey and lacrosse, and I started running to get better at those sports because there was a lot of running up and down the field with a hockey stick and the ball and a mouth guard and shin guards and cleats. And so I had to get used to that. And then as I started running in the mornings after that first tryout day, you know, after a couple of weeks, I started really, really loving the way it made me feel. And it also made me a better athlete. So that's when I started running in 1989, many years ago.
Well, I'm going to read this next question to you, which starts out, "You are awesome. Years ago, you inspired me to continue my quest to hike the 4,000 footers in New England. Yes. How would you encourage others to get out and try hiking? And what is your favorite New Hampshire hike?"
Wow. I will tell you about my favorite New Hampshire hike. And I actually do not remember, there are two, okay, Tecumseh. That was my first and only 4,000 footer. Tecumseh, the 4,000 footer. Very New England. And then that there is a trail. It's out of the Waterville
Valley area.
Skiing area.
All right, everybody on the chat can enter in what that one is.
And, you know, I don't really remember, but I was with my mom, right? It was, I was there for an REI event called REI Altessa, which doesn't happen anymore. And it was this event for women. And, for women to have a chance to recreate in the outdoors, and for people who were new to the outdoors to like have these like incredible experiences, right? And so I brought my mom along with me. My mom is very popular amongst everyone. And she had never really been on a hike that was more than a half a mile. And so we went on the beginner hike, which was not a beginner hike, down to a stream that had a huge, huge, huge boulder. And she was having some trouble. She has some mobility issues. And so she was having some trouble even with the lucky poles that she had. But she was able to do it because the REI instructors were so patient and compassionate with her. They're like, we want you to finish this. We want you to see that huge boulder down there. We want you to see the stream. And then they were like super cool going back up. And that, I don't remember, it was 3.5 miles. I don't remember quite what it was, but we walked right from the Waterville resort area. And that is a hike that will stay with me forever, because my mom was able to do something that I love in a supported way, where people were very giving and generous and gracious with their time and energy to make sure that she could have that experience too. And so that was my favorite hike in New Hampshire. I went on another one a couple of weeks ago, one of my favorite, because it was all uphill. Go figure. I know there was another part to that question though, right?
How would you encourage others to get out and try hiking?
I'm a firm believer in taking people with you. As much as I love to train on my own, I also want to bring as many people in the outdoors as possible. Hey, do you want to go on this short hike with me? I always lie and it ends up not being a short hike or run. That's my running, not the hiking. But I want people to experience what I experienced. So like, I will take them with me. Hey, do you want to go with me? I have a car. And so every time I go back home to New York City, I'm always taking people out. There's a woman she's a trail runner, kind of in the same space that I am in now. And she had never been on a hike. She's from Brooklyn. Her name is LaToya Snell. And she goes by Running Fat Chef. And she's like a big trail runner now, because I took her on her first hike. And that was Anthony's Nose, and right near Bear Mountain in New York on the Hudson. And she was like, her mind was blown. She was like, oh my goodness, whoa. And so that's something that we do every first of the year, because it's just, it's something that just sat with her and stayed with her. And it was such an incredible experience and memory that she wants to start her year off every year like that. And so, being invitational, being willing to go someone's pace, especially if they don't know how to navigate rocks and roots and things, and the mud kind of like skews them out, be okay with that. You might already be okay with that because you already have experience, but this is all new. And what might seem like not epic to you might be really, really epic to them. So really try to see the experience through their eyes.
You sort of were touching on that, this next question just now, but someone was wondering, how do you cope with fear or intimidation while you're out running?
So I have a lot of fear, especially of thunder. But I do, like, I get freaked out by sounds on the trail sometimes, but I know intellectually, like, I'm always juggling the emotional part with the intellectual part. I know intellectually that even if there's a bear, it doesn't want me. Like, it doesn't want me. I've seen bears out in the open, like, and it's scary. It is scary. Like, and I get it. Like, I acknowledge the fear that I have. And after I have stopped hyperventilating, I will return to my senses and try to figure out what to do, or if you're scared, take somebody with you. If you have a dog, I don't have a dog, but lots of people will go running or stuff and have their dog with them because it's a companion. It's another like living being that loves you and that tries to protect you. So there are many ways to cope with fear and stuff on the trail, out on the trail. Intimidation, I don't really get intimidated. If you're talking about other people, I am slow. I know I'm slow. That's my whole shtick. So I'm like, you do you go fast. I'm just gonna go slow, like I do. So so yeah, that's that.
Great. During your remarks, you mentioned the possibility of what the world would be like if we had more community in our society right now. What ways have you seen rebuilding community through exposure to nature and awe during these times of social distancing in adult communities, and I guess ways outside of just hiking?
Yeah, well, there's a program that I don't work with them directly, but I'm pretty close to the director, and it's called Come Alive Outside, right? And so there's that. There's the Vermont Land Trust that I've done some work for, and their whole during COVID, for example, the whole idea was to get people outdoors. So we'll have space for community and compassion when we're less stressed, right? And when we're less stressed, we're open to having these awe-inspiring experiences, right? And so the goal of all of these programs was to get people outside on their local trails, or just outside in general, whether you were walking around your neighborhood or something like that, and then decreasing your level of stress, your level of cortisol, et cetera, so that you would be open to, you know what, the sky is incredibly blue today. Whoa, like how did it get that blue? Look at these leaves, like now, like we're and it's the peak leaf color has passed, right? But there's still oranges and reds and stuff like that are available to us. But simply getting outside and having that tiny experience of seeing the leaves change, when we've been so consumed with all of the other things, well, just staying afloat, that will open your heart. That will give you space in your heart for compassion. So I would definitely look at, what the school does. We're not doing this explicitly, right? But it is a benefit of what we're doing as far as getting people to be outside and to like rock climb and to hike and to do it, whatever it is, whatever crazy things you do at your school. So there is a connection, but I don't think many of us are explicit about that.
Right. So we have a real practical question here. One of our viewers is curious, what emergency supplies do you bring on a long forest run?
Wow. Okay. Well, I have my drawer of emergency supplies over there, but I bring an emergency blanket. I'm always carrying, I clean the space behind me. It's usually full of stuff, but I always carry a hydration pack. I always have water. I don't go anywhere without water unless it's like a 1 mile something or other. But I always have water. I always know where the water sources are on my run, because usually it is a trail run, a hike / trail run. Emergency blanket, hydration. Always have a headlamp with new batteries or extra batteries. Rain a rain shell, something that's waterproof. I definitely have gotten caught many a times, like a rookie, in a rainstorm, because you get wet, it's cold, you get hypothermic, then you die. That's not fun, So make sure you have all of those things. I always have food. If it's not food, it's a gel, something that has calories, because when you have food and it's cold, your body can warm up much more easily. And if it's super long, I will have another pair of socks, in wool socks only. Wool socks. Y'all don't ever do cotton socks. I know you probably teach that as a basic thing. But those things, there are other things that I bring. My phone, a charger. I also have my Garmin InReach. Which is, I don't have to utilize the GPS in my phone to figure out where I am. I always have my watch on anyway. So I have 3 ways. I have my watch, I have my phone, and I also have my InReach that lasts for many, many hours. So if I needed search and rescue to come out, I can click on the SOS button and be found. Actually, real quick story. I don't know if I told you the story, but my son went missing in the Copper Canyons in Mexico last year. And it was very, very scary for me if he was missing for a couple of hours. He didn't even know he was lost. So, I mean, go figure. He wasn't lost. He didn't know he was missing. And, but, you know, he had food, he had, a bunch of gels and like some of those, like the stroke waffles that everyone's selling now. He had his watch on, he had his phone. And so if he had not had those things, we might not have found him. Because we finally managed to reach him on his phone with very, very spotty service. But you know, there are definitely ways to take care of yourself. REI has a list of 10 outdoor essentials that you should always pack away in your pack anytime you go outside. Very, very important to keep yourself safe. That's a great question. Thank you.
So just a couple more questions before we wrap up this evening. One, I'm assuming is coming from one of our students here on campus, and you touched on this briefly, but they asked, do you prefer to hike and run alone or with people?
Alone. And here's why. There are a couple of reasons. I really enjoy the time alone. I spend my life interfacing with people. And you know, as a teacher, I was with students all the time, and I love students. I was a boarding school teacher. I love students. I love you, but I needed some time to myself. And so there's that. I'm also like, my pace is much slower than a lot of people's. And so I never want there to be pressure on me or pressure on somebody else to go my pace, or pressure on me to do their pace. And so I just prefer to, you know, go at it alone. We can start at a trailhead together, you know, have some pictures, do some socially distanced selfies, and then go out for 2 hours. Everybody's at their own pace, come back after 2 hours. Everyone has gotten their run or their hike in. Everyone's gotten their time together. Sometimes people will hook up and run together, or for a couple of minutes or a couple of miles. And so it can be social, it can be your personal time, but it's also like a community thing. So, but nowadays anyway, like I'm always out by myself. That's how I prefer it to be, unless I'm teaching a trail running clinic, and then, you know, there might be 20 or 40 people.
One of the things that we've been doing a lot of work with here at the school is unconscious bias. Mm-hmm. And we have a question from one of our attendees that sort of connects into that. And this person is asking, what insights would you give a person who is very comfortable in the outdoors on something they might do, but unconsciously is making someone, a first timer, feel unwelcome or uncomfortable? How can we sort of step into some awareness there?
Yeah. Okay. So I think there are many ways to be more invitational on the outdoors. You know, and thank you for acknowledging that. You know, sometimes we just don't know. Like, we're trying to be invitational. We are trying to be welcoming, but we don't know what we don't know, right? I think that, for example, acknowledging and reminding yourself that not everybody has the same experience in the outdoors. So just to keep that in mind as you communicate with people, as you interact with people, acknowledge their experience. For one, I get mistaken for a beginning hiker or a beginning trail runner all the time. I'm fat, I'm Black. You don't see a lot of people out on the trails that look like me. And so people will immediately go to, well, that's a beginner. And then the person will become the expert, right? That is like one thing that I think we can work on a little bit better. And I actually am guilty of this too. It just like kind of leaving this feeling that we are the expert, right? None of us are the expert, right? Everyone is their own expert in whatever they are doing, right? And so if we come at it from a place of oh, well, let me see what this person's about. Let me see what is their story, and you share that way on a really basic human level. I think that's way better than saying, hey, do you have enough water in your pack? because that's happened to me before. Like somebody I didn't know, hey, are you good? I'm fine. I have all of the latest gear and water and everything. I'm good. But people will often assume that, even though I'm decked out and everything, that I don't have experience out on the trails. And then when people say, I'm good, leave them alone. Thank you. Have a great hike. So I think that's one way, just like to eliminate that feeling of I am the expert, in your actions, in your body language, very, very important.
Great. Well, Mirna, it's been incredible talking with you tonight. And I have just one final question. As we all look to the future, which would either be looking to the next few weeks, months, or years, do you have some parting words of wisdom to share with us? And perhaps another way of asking this question, are there any trail signs we should look for in the fog in front of us?
Woo. It's my own fault, the metaphor. Wow. Follow the signs that say heart. Follow the signs that say heart. That will point you in the right direction.
Great. Thank you so much, Mirna. It has been truly a joy to have you join us here this evening for our Family and Alumni Weekend. And we wish you all the best. And we are really looking forward to the day when you can come to White Mountain and join us on our trails here on campus and visit the 7 natural springs to hydrate.
Ooh, yes, I will be there. And thank you so much for letting me be in community with you all tonight. This was great.